Welcome to this explainer. Now, we all know that in 2026, the US is going to host the absolute biggest party on Earth, the World Cup. But, we really have to ask, what actually happens when all that confetti is finally swept away? Well, today we're diving into a really intriguing analysis from our source material that makes a pretty bold claim. It argues that after World Cup USA, economics is going to decline. Or at the very least, it suggests the tournament might just be a beautiful, glaring distraction from a four-pronged American economic reality check that's happening right under our noses.
To wrap our heads around this theory, let's just quickly glance at our agenda. We're going to cover the World Cup windfall, the debt spiral, what a K-shaped economy actually is, some major stock market warning signs, and finally, the ancient concept of bread and circuses.
All right, let's jump right in with Section 1, the World Cup windfall.
The source brilliantly sets up the stakes here by having us look at two fictional fans. Let's call them Tyler and Sophia. Now, they both live in a host city, they both make around 60 grand a year, and they both absolutely love soccer. But they approach this colossal summer in two entirely different ways. Tyler is our optimist, right? He's ready to just swipe the credit card for the memory of a lifetime. Sophia, though, is the skeptic. She's incredibly cautious about her spending, she buys just one cheap ticket in cash, and she is seriously questioning who actually profits from this whole massive spectacle. See, Tyler is listening to these massive headlines projecting a $17 billion windfall for the US economy. And honestly, it sounds amazing. This is a number heavily championed by FIFA and local politicians, and they're basically promising this golden era of job creation and booming tourism for the host cities. Tyler hears $17 billion and assumes a rising tide is going to lift all boats. Because he totally believes the local economy is about to take off, he happily puts a $1,200 ticket package on his credit card, he upgrades his TV, and he tells himself he's just going to pay it all off when that massive windfall finally trickles down to him. But then we have Sophia. She's looking at independent estimates from the Boston Consulting Group, which project a much smaller and, let's face it, much more realistic $5 billion in short-term economic activity. And here's the real kicker. That smaller number isn't just for the US, it's spread across all three host countries, the US, Mexico, and Canada. Sophia looks at this and realizes, hey, this isn't some life-changing windfall at all. It's basically the equivalent of a pretty good weekend at the mall smeared across a landmass of over 500 million people. It completely flips the financial reality of the event. According to the source, the actual stadium math shows a completely different ledger than what the splashy headlines want you to see. First of all, it's the public, meaning you and me, that pays for the security, the infrastructure, and the cleanup. So hundreds of millions of taxpayer dollars go right out the door before a single ball is even kicked. Second, you get what economists call the couch potato effect. Basically, regular tourists and even the locals just stay home. They want to avoid the gridlock, the insane crowds, the tripled hotel rates. And that severely offsets any new tourist spending. Third, while leaving the host cities holding the bag for the cleanup, the private organizers essentially fly away with the lion's share of the actual profits generated from broadcast rights and luxury suites. It's wild.
Which smoothly brings us to Section 2, the debt spiral, the first of four alarming macroeconomic warning signs.
Now, check out this slide, because this is a truly staggering comparison. This year, the US will spend over $1 trillion just on debt interest. That officially outpaces the entire national defense budget, and it outpaces Medicare. To put that into perspective, the source points out that we are spending roughly $3 billion every single day just renting the money we've already borrowed. The historian Niall Ferguson has a fairly brutal rule of thumb for this. Any great power that finds itself spending more on debt interest than on its own defense is a great power on the way down.
The source argues that this math triggers an unavoidable debt spiral. Historically speaking, this is a glaring neon warning sign of an empire in decline. Crushing interest pulls money straight away from the infrastructure, the innovation, and the social systems that actually make a country robust. And the math is just relentless. The more you owe, the more interest you pay, which means the more you have to borrow just to cover that interest. Watchdog agencies are actively flashing warning signs that by the 2030s, this interest rate could entirely outrun the growth of the underlying economy itself.
Moving right along, let's look at Section 3, a K-shaped economy. So, what is a K-shaped economy? The source defines our current state using this term to describe a massive economic split. Think of the letter K. You have the people on the top arm of the K who can easily drop 40 grand on a resale soccer ticket and not even blink. But then, on the downward arm of the K, you have people quietly coming apart at the seams just trying to afford basic groceries. The crazy part? When you average those two extreme ends together into a national jobs report or a GDP figure, the headline economy looks totally fine, but it completely masks the daily grinding struggle of millions of people sliding down that bottom slope.
And the crucial takeaway here is that our optimist Tyler, he is standing squarely on that downward slope of the K. He's temporarily cushioned by his 21% credit cards, but he's facing a totally collapsed savings rate and hidden taxes. Look at the reality of the lower K. Total household debt has hit a record $18 trillion. The personal savings rate has plummeted to roughly 4%. And guys, when you factor in a 21% credit card interest rate, if you only make the minimum payments, the real price of whatever you bought literally doubles in about 4 years. Tyler thinks he's participating in an economic boom, but he's really just treading water with weights strapped to his ankles.
That brings us to our fourth warning sign in Section 4, Stock Market Warning Signs.
So, the CAPE ratio. This measures stock prices against company earnings over a 10-year period, just to smooth out the short-term noise. Well, this summer, it crossed 40. That is a staggering height. We have literally seen it this high only one other time in over 150 years of financial records. And it's not just the CAPE ratio flashing red. The source notes that Warren Buffett's favorite metric, which compares the total stock market value to the entire GDP of the economy, recently pushed to 220%. For some context there, Buffett considers anything over 200% to be straight up playing with fire.
To really put this in historical context, as you can see on this timeline, the last time the market was this massively overvalued was in 1999, right before the spectacular dot-com crash. And remember, that crash was followed by a notorious lost decade for investors, where the market practically flatlined for 10 years. Now, optimists will tell you that today is fundamentally different because the Magnificent 7 tech stocks are incredibly profitable, but the source heavily cautions against trusting that. When an entire market relies on just 7 tech giants to pull all the weight, you're not looking at a beautifully diversified boom. You're looking at 7 massive, single points of failure.
Which leads us to our final point in Section 5, bread and circuses.
When you combine insurmountable debt, stall speed growth, a fracturing K-shape economy, and sky-high stock valuations with a massive mega event, the source draws this incredibly powerful historical parallel to the Roman concept of bread and circuses. It's an impartial look at how fading empires historically staged massive spectacles as a beautiful distraction from a rotting ledger. The source emphasizes that, throughout history, the games and spectacles tend to get the absolute biggest exactly when the math behind the scenes gets the absolute worst. The strategy is pretty simple. Give the people something magnificent to roar at. Keep their eyes up on the glittering show and not down on the crumbling foundation beneath their feet.
Now let's be absolutely clear here. The source is not claiming that a soccer tournament is somehow going to bring down the economy. It's not the cause. The argument is that after World Cup USA, economics is going to decline because the tournament just acts as this temporary, very loud mask over all these existing macroeconomic cracks we just talked about. Think about it. In 1994, America hosted the World Cup, while the economic fundamentals were incredibly strong, and that led right into the massive tech boom. But in 2026, the spectacle is arriving when the foundation is already showing serious stress fractures. The confetti isn't a lie. It's just a whole lot louder than the ledger.
So fast forward past the tournament. Tyler's optimism ends up costing him dearly when the bill finally comes due. His $1,200 ticket ballooned under that 21% interest, and as stall speed growth cuts his work hours, he has absolutely zero savings to fall back on. But Sophia? She finds that her boring financial cushion is her ultimate shield. She diversified her investments away from that overvalued stock market, she meticulously kept her savings rate high, and she navigated the economic slowdown totally fine. She didn't get rich overnight, but she won the game simply by not losing. As we wrap up this explainer, the source leaves us with one incredibly vital question to ask ourselves whenever politicians or markets promise us an endless, magical windfall. Are you counting the fireworks, or are you counting the zeros? Because I promise you, when the stadium lights finally turn off and everyone goes home, the loudest, brightest thing in the room rarely decides your future. It's almost always the quiet math that was happening in the background all along. Thanks so much for joining me today.